When Timea Nagy came to Canada from her native Hungary 11 years ago, she had high hopes of making money working as a domestic. Her problems began with immigration.
Why are you coming to Canada? And I said, you know, babysitting, domestic, this and that. And then hours later, the guy says, the problem is that your story doesn't match with your contract. And that was the first time that I heard that I'm here to do exotic dancing. And I signed the contract, but it was in English, so I didn't really, and they didn't really believe it at the time, so that's what greeted me. But very long story short, they let me go, and these Hungarian people and some guy picked me up from the airport.
From then on, she was a slave, forced to work as a stripper and prostitute to pay off her debt.
The people in the clubs, do you think they realized what was going on in your life? Do you think they had any idea?
No. Besides that I was 89 pounds and looked pretty sick, I think, I was smiling all the time. I was smiling because if I don't smile, I don't make money. If I don't make money, I get in trouble.
And no one would know her story today had she not finally come forward. That's the problem, according to this undercover police officer.
We know there's victims out there, but obviously if they're not willing to talk, we can't do anything. We know what this guy's doing or this trafficker's doing. We need them to come forward. And to do that, we have to break that wall that the trafficker pimp has built. We have an 18-year-old girl from
It's a wall that's meticulously constructed and protected, not with chains, but control.
What's the motivation?
Money. It's always money. Money for the trafficker, and it's very lucrative.
The UN estimates profits from human trafficking at $32 billion a year, the majority coming from sex slavery.
If I see the word young 18 or 19-year-old girl or whatever.
And while most Canadians think trafficking happens elsewhere, this detective says it's in our own backyard and easier to access than ever, thanks to online classified services.
Just the same way the trafficker or the pimp uses that to sell sex, I'm using it as an investigative tool to find them. And at any given day, you could go on there and you could see it by the hundreds. It's newspaper ads, it's in our massage parlors, it's in our strip clubs, it's everywhere. I would be safe to say there's not an adult entertainment establishment in the region of Peel that does not have a victim of human trafficking in it.
Does she have a jacket?
She doesn't even have a jacket.
Police work is not just getting into the mind of the predator, but the prey. And that's why Timea is working alongside them, giving them insight into the journey of a victim and why it's so difficult to escape.
I think I found a very good way to explain this. Imagine a woman who's involved in a domestic violence situation. Imagine a woman who was kidnapped. And imagine a woman who was molested when they were a child and they never talked about it. And they create these eating disorders or all kinds of disorders, right? Put all the three of them together.
And while the police are equipping themselves to fight this complex crime, they don't have the resources to tend to the victims.
They come with us, they give us their statement, they tell us their little life story, and at the end of the interview, they're looking at you across the table and saying, well, now what do I do? And that's their biggest fear.
That's why they rely on another force at work, made up of NGOs, charities, and people like Timea. Though she was trafficked from abroad, this is very much a Canadian issue, according to Naomi Baker.
All of our victims that we've dealt with thus far are Canadian citizens.
And a disproportionate number are Aboriginal girls.
When you hear their stories of why they decided to do what they're doing and how they got trapped and how they got literally brainwashed and coerced, the stories are endless and everyone rips your heart out every time you hear it.
That's why she started Canada Fights Human Trafficking, a national organization that not only finds safe houses for victims, but attempts to raise awareness of the issue. Baker says that's half the battle.
There's not a profile, there are multiple profiles. You can have victims as young as 3 in Canada. You can have victims that come from stable homes with wealthy families to the child who's been passed from foster home to foster home. What they look for, they being traffickers, They pinpoint the weakness of a person. They don't pinpoint a person.
The problem is it's a difficult issue to track and quantify, though Baker's organization is overwhelmed with demand and lack of resources.
Canada is being inundated with people trafficking children specifically because we let them. The average sentence right now in Canada is 2.5 months. That is unacceptable. It's one thing to be a nation of mercy, but what is mercy without justice?
It's that question that prompted MP Joy Smith's fight. It's one that started close to home.
When I was a member of the Manitoba Legislature, my son was in the Integrated Child Exploitation Unit, and his hair turned gray in less than 2 years.
She soon found out why.
Once I started working with the victims, I feel that the police officers and the on-the-ground people, the NGOs who work with these victims, are the real heroes in this country. And I think as a parliamentarian, it's very, very necessary that Canadians are aware and know how to protect their children.
Protecting is one thing, prosecuting the crime is another. Canada's first convicted child human trafficker received a 3-year sentence for selling 2 girls, aged 15 and 14.
He made in excess of $360,000 off this innocent 15-and-a-half-year-old girl. So can you imagine how many times she had to have sex with some pervert who was after a young girl and give the money over to Imani Nakpangi?
She was determined to do something about it.
If my bill passes through the Senate, we will have mandatory minimums of 5 years for people who sell children, 18 years and under. And if they rape them or do that kind of thing to them, they will get 6 years. Now that hurts me because I'd like them to have 96 years, but I would have had a court challenge. So I've had to very carefully construct that law so it wouldn't get a court challenge and that it would pass.
For a private member bill, C268 was a huge success. It easily passed all 3 readings in Parliament. But there's one final obstacle, the Senate. And just before Christmas break, the bill was stalled. What will happen when they reconvene in March is still up in the air. In the meantime, there's a grassroots campaign underway to rally senators around the issue.
Canadians need to rise up. If Canadians don't, and this bill dies, it's going to take at least another year, 2, 3, or 4 for anything to be a mandatory minimum in this country.
In the meantime, the bill has overwhelming support on the front lines, though this officer admits it won't make the problem go away.
I think it'd be a lot easier for them to come forward to the police knowing that this person actually might stay in jail for some time. You have to keep them separate as long as you can.
Would you be able to drive her away from there?
It's taken Timea a long time to get back to life. She started the organization Walk With Me to make sure no others have to take that long road to healing alone.
I think this is my healing process, what I'm doing now. A lot of people ask me, why are you doing it? Isn't it hard for you? You know what? No. When I take home a girl for Christmas, you know, because she was kept against her will for 2 months, and walk her through that door and see her seeing her parents, I've never had that. No one took me home. So that's my healing process.
In Toronto, Denise, Lodde, 100 Huntley Street.